Hello, everyone. My name is Jessie Stahl, and I am the Senior Policy and Program Coordinator at PlantPure Communities. I am delighted to welcome you all to our Facebook Live event with Dr. Colin Campbell and his son, Nelson Campbell, where we will hear about Dr. Campbell's important new commentary, as well as the global 10-day Jumpstart that kicks off on April 19th. I have a few housekeeping items I would like to go over with you. First, we would love for you to share this video on your personal page with your friends and family and in any group pages you are on by clicking the share arrow on the bottom right corner of the video. We will have a live Q&A portion later on where you can ask questions directly in the comments, and the PPC staff will be monitoring these throughout. And if we do not get to your questions, please email globaljumpstart@ppc.org. Also, a reminder that we are unable to answer personal health questions or provide medical advice. And now I will have a few of my fellow PPC team members, Ella and Jody, briefly introduce themselves before we hand it over to Caroline.
Thank you, Jessie. My name is Ellis Stevens. I am the Pod Support Programs Manager at PlantPure Communities. I am joining from Massachusetts today, and we are very happy to have you all here with us.
My turn, right? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jody Cass. I'm the Executive Director of PlantPure Communities, and I want to give you all a great big welcome, and especially to our guest, Dr. Colin Campbell. And I'm joining you from New York. Thank you for being here.
Hey everyone, we're delighted to have you with us tonight. My name is Caroline Dyer, and I'm the Vice President of PlantPure Communities located in Durham, North Carolina. I'm pleased to introduce our guests, Nelson Campbell and his father, Dr. Colin Campbell. For extensive bios of both of them, please check out our website in the About Us section. Dr. Campbell serves on PlantPure Communities Board of Advisors. He is the co-author of the New York Times bestselling book, The China Study, and is a bionutritional researcher with over 60 years of experience in the field of nutritional science. Dr. Campbell is the Jacob Gould Sherman Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry at Cornell University and is the founder of the Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies and the online Plant-Based Nutrition Certificate course in partnership with eCornell. Dr. Campbell, is there anything you would like to say before I introduce Nelson?
It's a pleasure to be here. I don't do Facebook, and just to hear all these people from all over the world, almost, it's kind of exciting. This is a worldwide problem, as we know. Great.
And we're also pleased to be joined by our founder and chair of our board of directors, Nelson Campbell, who also founded the business PlantPure Inc. and directed the 2015 documentary film PlantPure Nation, which is available to watch for free on YouTube. Nelson sets the priorities and guides the direction of PlantPure Communities. Nelson, I'll hand things off to you now.
All right, thank you, Caroline. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and thanks to the entire PlantPure Communities team. This idea of a Jumpstart was hatched just actually a few days ago, and they have worked heroically to pull this off. As most of you know, if not almost all of you, my father wrote a commentary recently about a very important idea. And the idea for the commentary really started with an article that we read on statistics in Italy. The National Health Authority in Italy did a study and determined that over 99% of the folks who succumbed to this terrible disease, COVID-19, had pre-existing health conditions, and these are mostly lifestyle-related diseases. And as a result of that, they also had weakened immune systems. Now, as most of you know, many of you know, diet can address both of these issues, both the underlying lifestyle disease process and weakened immune systems. And so we started talking about an article. My dad put a commentary together. It's well written and quite provocative. If you haven't seen it, we encourage you to go check it out on the plantpurecommunities.org website. It's important to say here up front that we're not saying that people won't get infected if they eat plants. What we're saying, what my father is saying, is that if people take care of themselves and they eat the right diet, that they can minimize their risk of having serious complications. So the question about this is, how do we communicate this idea? This is such an important idea. How do we get the word out? And Jody Cass bears some responsibility for this. She says that she was asleep on a Friday night and somehow dreamt this up during her sleep. So she called me up on Saturday morning with the idea of a Jumpstart. The roots of the general concept of a Jumpstart, though, go back in time quite a ways. Many of you have seen our film PlantPure Nation. But back in 2012 and 13, we started doing 2-week immersion programs in the local area where we live in North Carolina. And we discovered that when people go on a plant-based diet 100% for 10 to 14 days, that they see incredible changes in their numbers. Over 80% of the people who were medicated going into that process had the option to significantly reduce or eliminate those medications on the 11th or 15th day. So the changes were startling. And so we started working on this idea of a Jumpstart and eventually streamlined it. And that's the process, that's the program that we used in our film PlantPure Nation that we showed could go viral in a small southern town. So we're essentially now doing this on a global scale. You know, we're trying to do a global Jumpstart. And we think the time is right for this because of this crisis. I think people today are more health conscious than ever and are more open to the idea of plant-based nutrition. In fact, we have people signed up from over 50 countries so far, well over 2,000 people. I don't know exactly what the current count is, but I know it's somewhere north of 2,000. So we're quite excited about doing this for you and with you. And now what I'd like to do is to provide a little more information on the Jumpstart. So the first thing to mention is that starting tomorrow, PlantPure Communities will begin sending materials to those of you who've signed up. So if you haven't signed up, please do so tonight, and it's easy to do. There's a simple form on the PPC website, plantpurecommunities.org, to sign up to the Global Jumpstart. The kickoff begins April 19th, which is this Sunday, and we have an event, a webinar, at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time now. So please put that time on your calendar, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday, April 19th. And we're going to kick it off with an interactive session, which I'll lead with the PPC team. And again, if you've signed up for the Jumpstart, you'll receive instructions on how to participate in this. And this will be an opportunity to have your questions answered. At the kickoff event, PPC will be sending and providing a schedule for the 10 days. The Jumpstart occurs over 10 days. And it has a number of elements that you will receive. First is a seminar. This is a seminar program donated by PlantPure. It's just over a 2-hour program, and it was created by the fellow who produced Forks Over Knives in our film PlantPure Nation. So it's very well done. You're really going to enjoy it. We also have a 28-page seminar workbook that goes along with the seminar, and it has a lot of practical advice and information pertinent to the Jumpstart. Then on days 1 through 10, you'll be getting a daily email from PlantPure Communities, and each email will have links to recipes, information sheets, and invitations to online events. It also will include a link to a short video each day from Dr. James Markham. Dr. Markham is a cardiologist in Tennessee, and he was featured in our film PlantPure Nation. You also will be getting links to cooking videos by my wife, Kim Campbell, who's a chef at PlantPure. And we have 8 to 10 professionally taped cooking videos. These are very well done. You'll also be getting a couple recipes each day, and each day will have its own kind of culinary theme. And the idea here is to just give you a glimpse into what's possible with the plant-based diet. What we'd really like you to do is go back to a recipe database that we have at plantpurenation.com, where you'll be able to access all of Kim's recipes, because we know that during this crisis that some of you may be in areas where certain ingredients aren't available. So we're not going to, tell you exactly what recipes to do each day, but what we'd like you to do is to go to that database and take a look at what's there and find something that'll work for you. Finally, we also are going to be providing some webinars and check-in events online. So we'll have several of these. And we're excited to announce that Dr. Michael Clapper will be joining us for a live discussion on April 21st. Most of these live interactive sessions will take place at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we're still working on the details of some of this, so we'll be getting back to you with more information on that. A couple final points here. Some people who've gone through this Jumpstart, many people actually, have done pre and post measurements of various kinds. People have often actually gotten their biometrics done. It's basically a cholesterol panel. We know that many people can't do that right now. It's just not feasible. But what you can do is you can weigh yourself, you can check your waist circumference, you can check your blood pressure if you have some equipment at home. And so if you want to do that, that's not a bad idea, because when you see those numbers change, it's very motivational. This is the first Jumpstart that we're doing, but we're going to be doing this hopefully on a recurring basis. And the next Jumpstart will be on May 10th. So some final requests before we go into the Q&A of you, and that is everyone who's on the Facebook Live event here, we would love for you to invite, make a commitment to invite 5 to however many of your friends you can persuade to join up here. And you can start doing that now or as soon as the live stream is over. We also have a Global Jumpstart Facebook group, and we encourage you and your friends to join that. And again, let people know that they can sign up for this at the Global Jumpstart page on PlantPure Communities website, plantpurecommunities.org. And finally, if any of you have leads to connect with celebrities or influencers who you think might be willing to join the Jumpstart or help get the word out, let us know. So that's it for my opening remarks. And I know many of you have joined this to hear my father talk about his article. So let's go into the Q&A.
Thank you, Nelson, for that presentation. And so hi, everyone, and hi, Dr. Campbell. For background information, Jesse and I both transferred to Cornell University after reading Dr. Campbell's book, The China Study, to learn more about the exciting and life-changing science behind plant-based nutrition. You wrote The China Study with your son, Thomas Campbell, to explain the connection between diet and chronic diseases, such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, obesity, high blood pressure, and others. Can you briefly summarize what you learned about chronic disease and nutrition in your groundbreaking China study?
That's my question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, well, what I learned is something quite the opposite of what I once thought to be true. I was raised on a dairy farm, so I was eating the typical American diet. And in any case, I got into this profession of nutritional science and started learning some things. I think people from the book will know what the origin of that was. But I just learned that the effect of nutrition in creating health is far more than I could ever imagine, and more than most of my colleagues could imagine. And it was something that was quite different from the typical American diet, based on plants, whole food, based on whole food plant-based material. And so, we can reverse heart disease. I didn't do that. My good friend, Dr. Esserton and Dr. Ornish had done that. But in any case, a lot of this, I was working through the science over the years with lots of students, and really doing it fairly critically and seeing things like, for example, that animal protein could turn on cancer experimentally. It was very dramatic, very rapid, as a matter of fact. We could turn cancer on and off just simply by increasing or decreasing animal-based protein. Of all things, it was a protein from cow's milk. Then we went on to discover that, you know, the plant-based proteins did not do that. And the story just kept expanding. And I finally got to a point where I realized I was really challenged in some major industries, if you will, the way we do things. And so that's what the book is about. I'm just simply offering our evidence to show that the role of food, as it is expressed through its nutritional effect. I mean, the word nutrition, by the way, I think I like to define it as the biological expression of food. They're quite different, diet and nutrition. But in any case, the effect of nutrition is extraordinary. It's not offered in medical schools. We tend to be confused about it, both professionally and in the public. And as gone on in my career, I just realized that more and more. And it's a big time issue, how we can learn about nutrition, because as Nelson just mentioned too, the results that we see, we oftentimes see within days. And then the question becomes, okay, and incidentally, it does more than all the pills and procedures combined, from my perspective. And so I think we're onto something really big. And that if we can get the world at large to understand, you know, a little bit better what this information is, so they can really appreciate the size of the effect. And they can also understand too, they can't do it today, tomorrow, next day, see what you get, and then go back to do what they did before. This is a lifestyle. This continues in time. And so that's the sum and substance of it. Just basically eating this food. And I say this personally, and I'm sure that people here online and yourselves, this is just my interpretation in a sense, that a lot of people may have some difficulty making the switch. That's understandable. I mean, I came from a farm, eating the other way around. We took quite a little while doing that. But it turns out that I'm sort of saying that in a month or two, our taste preferences really begin to change in a very positive direction. And what we once thought might be, you know, bland rabbit food, if you will, all of a sudden it becomes very tasty. It becomes very tasty. So we're sailing forward then, because then we're seeing the results. We're loving the food. We're learning how to cook the food, and everything starts to fall into place. It's quite remarkable. So that was some of the substance of the China study.
Excellent. And we have another question for you, Dr. Campbell, about your research. What did your research in China reveal on the connection of diet to viral infections?
Yes, obviously I was as surprised as anyone else to see the seriousness of the current crisis, this new virus, if you will. Viruses have been with us forever, and the flu-type viruses come and go almost every year, as we know. This one here was particularly bad, as it turned out. And we weren't prepared very well to follow it, you know, what was up for us. But the thing about viruses, there's one thing they all share. And I have to mention this because one property they all share is that they're nasty little things. They come in and invade our cells. They come into the body, they get inside the cells, and at that particular point in time, the natural thing to occur, and Nelson mentioned this, is for the immune system to just rev up, in a sense, get its machinery going, and deactivate or inactivate the virus by creating antibodies. So all viruses really elicit this kind of response. Antibodies form, and when antibodies form, that's really a good thing. But some of the virus, if that doesn't happen, then it can go on to do damage. And so we actually looked, surprised, I had sort of forgotten that, but we looked in some detail back in the late 80s and early 90s on some viruses in our China study. And one virus we looked at in considerable detail. We studied it in the laboratory. We had lots of measurements of it in the population. that was hepatitis B virus, which causes liver cancer. It's probably one of the most serious viruses in the entire world, has been for a long time. And we actually, in that population in China of about 8,000 people, we actually measured those who had been exposed to the virus and had formed antibodies, as opposed to those who had experienced the virus and did not form antibodies. So we had data, really from a large population. We had data on who had the antibodies and who did not. Most people had antibodies over time. And then we had additional information on the role of what kind of dietary characteristics was associated with the conversion to antibodies, that is, creating immunity. And lo and behold, when I went back and looked at our latest set of data, I mean, I knew this sort of before, but I wasn't as impressed as what I am now. It turns out that when we measured plant food intake, I mean, I should say this, we measured lots and lots of nutrient factors. We had 300 and some factors we measured for this big study. But in any case, on the nutrition side, we had a number of factors to indicate the kind of food being consumed. And one was indicators of plant food consumption. Another was indicators of animal food consumption of various kinds. Sometimes in the blood, sometimes, what we eat. And what I found was that when they consume more plant-based foods, and that is to say for those people who consume more plant-based foods, let me just say it that way, they had a substantially increased amount of antibodies. So antibody formation, the extent to which people can form antibodies is influenced by nutrition. It's very, I mean, the statistics for me was very impressive. For those interested in statistics, what I can say is that of the factors that, there are a number of factors significant at the P05 level, P01 level, even several of them, there's some that are more significant. So at the P001 level, so that was highly, highly significant. And the contrast between eating foods on the animal side as opposed to eating foods on the plant side was really quite distinctive. And I think one of the major things that I would say about that is that the amount of animal food consumed in China, in that population of world China, was actually very low compared to us. On average, the animal food in China makes up, or the protein, animal protein in China, makes up only that's 10% of the proportion we have in this country. About 70% of our total protein in this country, 70 to 75% is from animals. In China, it was like 7 or 8%. And yet, even that small intake of animal-based foods was associated with increased, for example, blood cholesterol. It's highly significant. That, in turn, is related to Western diseases, heart disease, cancer, and that sort of thing, the so-called degenerative diseases. And lo and behold, it's also associated with the presence of that virus in the form of antibodies. Plants create antibodies. So I take that as evidence. I take that as evidence. Some people, maybe a leap of faith. I don't take it quite that way. But in any case, that's evidence. That's what should work for the coronavirus as well. So I'm basically hypothesizing, this data correctly, that if people, or let's say, so we're all in touch with the possibility of getting the coronavirus, that's for sure. But for those people who haven't yet experienced that awful event, if they were to eat plants, it's less likely, I think, that's a little bit more problematic for me to say that, but for people who test positive, the virus positive people now, who actually can go on to express that virus and experience the really bad problems, or to go the antibody route, people who are exposed, who are positive, they can go either down the route, causing problems, or the other route, doing the antibodies. And it turns out if they switch to this diet, I would love to see that just highly organized experiment. But our data show that people who switch, and as Nelson said before, the effects are really surprisingly rapid. They're surprisingly rapid in other systems. I wouldn't be a bit surprised in this case, too, that this is a way to acquire antibody protection. Antibodies form pretty fast, as we know. We already know that from the present data with the coronavirus. So I don't know, I'm quite enthusiastic about this being a way a way for, since we're all sitting at home and we maybe have some time on our hands, for those who haven't really experienced this, learn a little bit about it and try it out. I think nothing's lost. And it's particularly important for those people who tend to suffer the consequences. Older people, for the most part, almost all of them, like 95% or so, they have a disease, like one of the degenerative diseases, that's going to help fix that right straight off. So the diet is working two ways. First is, it's reversing, if you will, or the chronic degenerative diseases, which in turn are risk factors for the virus itself, as well as creating more antibodies of the virus. I think it's a no-lose situation. It's all win-win. And I hear people talking these days a lot on the television about some of these so-called experts about antibody formation. Now everybody's talking about antibody formation, and nobody's mentioning the one thing that causes antibody formation, the factor likely to be the greatest factor of all, and that's the food we eat. So I just think, I don't know, I just find this very exciting.
Thank you so much.
One more comment. Yeah, okay, I talked too long.
So my next question here is for Nelson. Many of the people participating in the Facebook Live event are members of pods. Can you explain what a pod is and what is the most effective thing that pod members can do to help share this information?
Well, at the end of our film, PlantPure Nation, and if you haven't seen that, I recommend that you go check it out. It's on YouTube and also Amazon Prime, and I think some other platforms that you can access if you have to pay a fee. But at the end of the film, we had a call to action for people to form local support and advocacy groups, and we call these groups pods because the idea is we're planting seeds of change in local communities. And after the film came out, people answered that call to action. We have hundreds of pods. I think we're close to 500 now. Over 250,000 people are affiliated with these pods. And typically what pods do is they meet on a regular basis. It might be every couple weeks or every month. And it usually revolves around a potluck. So people come together, they share recipes, they share dishes, and they visit and they find social support. A lot of pods have also done educational things, so they do something educational. And we have a strategy that we are getting ready to launch, actually, hopefully before the next Jumpstart in early May, to really empower our pods to begin doing sort of more activist things within their local communities to help get this word out. And so we have a new platform that we've been programming for 3 years. And hopefully it'll be ready to go for the second Jumpstart in May. And we'll be talking more about that in a subsequent webinar. But in terms of, so that's what pods are. In terms of what you can do to get the word out, social media is very powerful, especially since we're all stuck in our house right now and we can't get out and meet face to face like we'd like to do. So I would just get on your computer and talk to your friends, send emails, do Facebook posts, and we have some materials as part of the Jumpstart that we can share with you to help make that promotion and sharing easier for you. I don't know if anyone on the PPC team wants to comment on that, but where do people find those resources?
We will share the link in the Facebook chat, and it is also going to be available on our Global Jumpstart webpage, and in our Facebook groups. We will make those resources widely available.
Okay.
Okay, next question. So Colin, this question is for you. How do you know that the effect you found in your research extends to a variety of viruses? For example, Tamiflu only covers a small subset of viruses.
Well, there's two different philosophies here as far as the causation of disease is concerned and treatment of disease. I've really become acutely aware of that in the last 10, 20 years, I guess. basically, one form, the one that's virtually everyone experiences and uses, is a so-called medical model, or which I argue is the reductionist model. We tend to look for very specific agents to treat, very specific endpoints. So we look for very specific agents that cause a disease, one at a time. That really isn't a very productive way of thinking about things, in my view. There's a lot of side effects come along with that, unpredictable events, if you will. That's modern medicine. I know I'm saying something here that's strident for a lot of people, but that's modern medicine. And in contrast, nutrition doesn't work that way. It doesn't work on a nutrient by nutrient basis. We can test it, and or sort of looks like that's the way it works sometimes, but that's not the way it works. Nutrition is, the beauty of nutrition is the fact that there are infinite nutrient-like factors, many of them we call nutrients, but infinite numbers of nutrients that actually work together in marvelous ways. I saw that many years ago, sort of living inside of a cell, if you will, in a sense, and watching this complexity, this complex arrangement. And it's all highly integrated. Nutrition is a very different thing. So the Tamiflu thing, for example, is actually by design is targeted to a specific entity or specific virus, if you will. Whereas nutrition, that's not the way it works. It works, this plant-based nutrition has a broad sweep of effects that, and it works on viral diseases from our experience so far. Everything it's totally consistent that nutrition will work, and it's not because of one thing in the food. It's everything working together as it comes from plant foods. So the Tamiflu thing, interesting, very typical. That's the drug, approach. That's the drug philosophy. Let's, find a drug to do such and such. In fact, I hear that all the time on the television. It annoys me that every time they start talking about solutions, they're always trying to figure out, how can I get a drug to knock this thing out? Or how can I do this? How can I do? So focused. That's not the answer. It may help in the short run in some occasions, but if people really want to just experience health as it should be known and practiced, they've got to eat whole food, stay with it. Cut me off if I'm talking too long, but I can get carried away.
You're great. The next question we have is for Nelson. Is the Global Jumpstart program good for people who are already eating a whole food plant-based diet?
I think it is. It's, if you go through this, it creates an opportunity for you to invite others around you to do it with you. So even though you may be plant-based, grab some friends and all do it together. And also, it's just helpful to remind yourself, why this is so important. You're going to learn some information and get access to some ideas and things that you haven't seen before. And so it'll be informative and fun and something that you can do with your friends. One thing I'd like to add to what my dad just explained in that last answer is he's actually working on a second article. In fact, we were talking about it today, and I think it's essentially done. That goes right to the heart of that question about does plant-based nutrition apply to a range of viruses? And in reading through that article and talking to you, Dad, I think the difference between the pharmaceutical approach and what you advocate is the difference between reductionism and holism. You're advocating giving the body what it needs to create optimal health. And when it creates optimal health, that affects every part of the total system, every aspect of its functioning. And that's why eating a plant-based diet lowers the risk for and even treats a broad range of chronic diseases. So you would expect the same thing to happen with respect to viral conditions. The immune response is similar, across those various kinds of infections. And so it just stands to reason that when you give the body what it needs, it's going to create health, just, and affect every aspect of its functioning. And that's a point that you make in your article, and I think it's pretty compelling.
Yeah, you said it well. I mean, the plant-based diet food, if it was, got infinite numbers of factors. This is one of the fascinating issues about nature. Nature itself rolls on this enormous body of material and can rearrange things and it can adapt to things. And what we now see is it has a very broad sweep of effects within the immune system itself. The immune system is a very complex system. Many things you can produce. We usually measure those things from time to time with, by indicators like natural killer cells, T cells, B cells, that sort of thing. We did that in the laboratory too. And so we measured those kind of things in response to nutrition. And that's where we got our information to basically, I'm sorry, the light went out here as I was talking. So if you can hear me, I guess that'll work. Maybe let's try something here. Okay, let's try that. In any case, the immune system is a marvelous, like so many systems in our body. The immune system, its job is to go after and attack foreign bodies that come into our own body. And it has so much in its toolkit, and it responds so fast. It can rearrange these things, and it turns out that whatever's in plants, all these things together, sort of from everything we see so far, it just sort of turns on all these switches, rearranges things, lines them up, and goes after and creates an antibody for starters. So yeah, it's a different philosophy, very different philosophy, and it's opposite what I thought when I first started my career, I should say, in more ways than one, but it's exciting.
Thank you, Colin. And I actually have a related question. What are the best foods and nutrients to strengthen the immune system during these times?
I don't tend to answer those kind of questions very much because, yeah, I can mention some classes of foods. I don't want to get too specific about foods because that immediately suggests, we have some evidence in this food, that food, or something else. I don't particularly like to go down that road, but on the one hand, there are classes of food that certainly contribute, and they all do something in the plant world, by the way. I like to think that the colored vegetables, leafy greens, especially that sort of thing, I mean, they got a lot of antioxidants. The color itself in the vegetables is actually what imparts the physical property of color. So it's a good bet to eat a lot of colored vegetables for starters. One can take their pick. I don't think that kale is necessarily any better than spinach or chard or anything else. And so this is a nice idea because I think it allows people to choose what they prefer. It also allows people to have a variety of things. They don't have to just, eat a fistful of this, that, or something else every day. And it turns out that colored vegetables, and we need some energy, okay? We need energy. There we have the tubers and the grains, the whole food, or the whole grains, if you will, loaded with all the energy in the form of carbohydrate, not much fat, in fact, very low in fat, but we need some fat too, but we can find that well enough in some of the plant foods that have fat. Nuts, for example, avocados. And so, yeah, and so we get the whole 9 yards. We get the vitamins, we get the minerals, somehow I think this is nature at work. And we're just getting around to really discover that. And nature had a long time to put together our machine than we ever could possibly think about it. And so it's about time we start going back and sort of asking ourselves, what is this thing called nature? And how does it work? So individual foods, I'm afraid I'm not going to answer your question. Just greens, lots of greens, tubers, grains, whatever. Fruits are obviously good. And we shouldn't be fearing them because they got too much of something we think is bad. We can eat a variety of foods. So that's, to me, that's so simple. It is so simple. And we should focus not so much on that particular question, but rather focus on how do we make good food? And how can we make food tasty? I've often said, I've said for many years, some of the most important people in this area of work are the chefs. The people working in the kitchen, just trying to figure out, what's a really nice way to make some food that's tasty and fun. And to get on with that, that's an important part of the equation, I think.
I think one of the things that over the years I've heard you complain about a lot are recommendations to overconsume certain kinds of plant foods, whether that be greens or something else, based on their nutrient density or some specific quality that they have. And what you've always said makes a lot of sense, just a variety of all of that, a rainbow of color, and eating from all parts of the plant and not getting too concerned about any one element of the plant-based diet, but eating it all.
That's right. It's simple. The biology is infinitely complex. That's what I like to say. I admit that. And if people want to understand what to eat in terms of trying to understand the biology, forget it. Because we can go on forever talking about those details. It's fascinating stuff. I loved it because I was working in that area. But on the other hand, when you just want to get healthy and keep it simple and get on with some joy in your life, you all kinds of varieties of these foods, and just stay with that. Don't be going down the road of, quite frankly, eating animal-based foods, which is a foreign idea for me, coming from the farm, I can tell you. And that took quite a time to jump through that hoop. But in any case, that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Nelson, we have a question for you. Do you have any suggestions for those who are currently unemployed, have lack of funds, or have limited community resources for healthy food due to this pandemic?
Yeah, this is a very important question, and it's something that we think about a lot within PlantPure communities, and it's part of our strategy also on the PlantPure side. And we discussed this in our film, PlantPure Nation, the problem of food deserts. Unfortunately, I feel like over the last few years in this plant-based movement, we haven't given nearly enough attention to how do we get this information and affordable foods out to everyone. When people think of a plant-based diet, they oftentimes assume it's more expensive, and they think of whole foods, and maybe it seems complicated. And so there are a lot of people out there who don't think that they can do this for economic reasons, but that's just not true. The best thing to do if you have limited means is to learn, to study, to research, to learn how to cook your own food. If you go to the store and you buy some of the vegan processed foods, those foods are more expensive, and furthermore, they're not healthy, most of them. So the best thing you can do is to learn how to cook, and of course we all have a lot of time to learn that. And you can take a simple approach, or you can take a complicated approach. There are a lot of recipes that are a lot easier to do. Also, there are certain ingredients that are quite inexpensive, like beans and potatoes, and there are always vegetables, in-season vegetables, that are cheaper. So there's definitely a way to do this that's affordable. In fact, I would argue, having done this for many years now, that once you crack that code and you learn how to do it, this is the cheapest way to eat.
Thanks, Nelson. We have another question for you. What are the easiest ways to try whole food plant-based eating if your family or housemates refuse to try it with you?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I can't tell you. It turns out in our family, we've got 5 grown children. My wife has been fantastic in putting things together, so we all do that and we enjoy it. But I know it is a tough question. I have friends who the spouses, one does one does another. That must be a really tough situation. And to try to resolve that, if only, I don't know, I'm just being silly, anybody can give this answer. If only basically they just had the willpower, just try it. If they care about their health and they care about, those around them too, this should not be considered a foreign idea. And I think the most important thing people don't often hear is that, you know, they can get into this if they just use a good deal of willpower in some cases, stay with it for at least a month or two, as I said before, when the taste preferences begin to change. Now it's enjoyable. All of a sudden, hey, I like this. And they're seeing the benefits. I think that's the best way. Think about it not as a lifelong drudgery, you know, that they might have to suffer. That doesn't happen that way. That's not at all. It's actually getting into it and finding those things is just a lot of, just a good feeling. Blood pressure drops. You feel more alive. And of course, all you guys know this, but I think for the listener out there, and probably most of the listeners are very much aware of this, but I don't know. It's just, you go ahead, Nelson.
I would add to that. I would add to that a couple more thoughts, because this is a really important issue, and we've heard this over and over again as we're out there talking to people about this idea. It's a common problem. And the first thing is you have to be careful if you're plant-based and you're wanting those around you to do this. You have to be careful not to be overbearing or preachy or judgmental. That never works. We have to recognize that people will do this on a consistent long-term basis if they choose to do it. And when you get pushy and judgmental and preachy, you take that opportunity for a decision away. So this has to be freely chosen, and humility is the best basis for that. So be humble. A good dose of love is helpful too. This is a loving message and a loving act to expose other people to this, and so just come at it from that way. And then finally, you can't underestimate the importance of great tasting food. So we've had many experiences with people who are mainstream eaters, and they're eating at Bojangles or some other fast food, and they've never tried plant-based, but they try some of the recipes that we've made, and they're won over. So flavor is important, and there is a school of thought in the plant-based community which is a little more extreme, to eliminate, for example, all salt and all sugar from your diet. We promote the idea of oil-free, but having a little flavor in your food is a good thing, because that's how you're going to convince people to do this. Most people have no idea how good this food could taste. I'd never go back now, just because the food is so good.
Thank you, Nelson. So I have a question here for Colin. How long do you need to eat whole food plant-based in order to experience beneficial effects on your immune system? Essentially, how quickly can our immune systems improve by eating this way?
Well, from some of the indicators that health indicators, if you will, we see these changes occur within a week. Now, the immune system is probably a little slower than that. So I don't know. It depends on what we're measuring, I suppose, and the state of health of the person at the time. Some of these changes will continue to accrue, build up over a period of months. So I think the best answer I can give is we just know that some of these things begin to change within a week. Let's say it that way, and within a month certainly. Diabetes is a classic example where people, for example, they are taking, let's say, their insulin, whatever, type 2 diabetes, and it turns out that if those folks were to go on this diet, wholesale right now, within a day or two, they've got to actually drop their medications because the diet is so powerful in reducing the blood sugar that they can actually go into some risk with hypoglycemic shock. You can't have the drugs and the diet together. The diet is better than the drugs. So they actually have to almost say, whether they want to or not, they have to have to lower their insulin dosage. And so in those kind of things, I find amazing. I mean, in the laboratory we were doing many years ago, of course, at that time we were using experimental animal models, but I could see things change in significant enzyme changes and that sort of thing within 12 hours. of consuming the nutrient. So the body is very responsive. It's really very responsive, much more so than I think a lot of people realize. Certainly, and it keeps on going. It keeps on going for maybe some months. Immune system, I'm just trying to think of it. I don't know any specific evidence I'm familiar with. Natural killer cells, which is one component of the immune system, T cells, B cells, natural killer cells, that sort of thing. I mean, that kind of thing can begin and be expressed within days. I'm really convinced of that. And those are important components of the immune system. But yeah,
related to seeing those results, we have a question for Nelson. How can Jumpstarters share their results from participating in the Global Jumpstart?
You know, I know that we had discussed this within our team, and I don't remember what we had decided on that. I mean, I know that, you know, you can obviously share results with your friends as you would any other information, but did we have anything specific that we wanted to recommend in this regard? Ella?
Yes, we have a Global Jumpstart Facebook group, which we can post the link to in the Facebook live stream now. So we recommend people share their successes and testimonies there to encourage other people. You also can share any of your results with us on the Global Jumpstart at PlantPure Communities email. We would love to hear what food you're making, how your health has changed, and we also have resources that are being sent out prior to the Jumpstart that will ask specific questions about how you're feeling and instruct you to weigh yourself or take before and after photos or measure your blood pressure if you have a cough. So we have different suggestions for those, and they will be sent out to everyone who's registered, so make sure you register with the link pinned in the comments on Facebook. I have a question for Colin, but Colin...
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
For a second, he'll be back. So Nelson.
So Nelson, we can ask you a question while we're waiting for Colin. How can participants of the Jumpstart who are new to whole food plant-based continue eating this lifestyle after the 10 days are up?
It's really all about knowledge, learning as much as you can through this Jumpstart process. You know, learning again, you know, how to cook, experiencing the health benefits, which if you do this for 10 days, you're definitely going to feel better. You're going to feel more energetic. Maybe you have less aches and pains. Maybe you sleep better. So doing all of that will help to motivate you. Motivation is important. Knowledge is important. Also, community support is very important. And so one of the things that we always recommend is look into the idea of starting or joining a pod. There are many communities around the country and even around the world now that have pod groups. So you can go to the plantpurecommunities.org website to look up to see if there's a pod in your area. And if there's not, you can start one. And all it takes is 2 or 3 people to start a pod, and you'll be amazed at how quickly it will kind of organically grow. And so you just need a starting point. And so go to plantpurecommunities.org. And I think that's just really important, that community support. We have a pod, our own pod in Mebane, which is where we did our film. And we always draw a big crowd. And it's just so fun because, you know, some of the same people have been coming, you know, over and over. So we get to know each other and we make friends. And it's just nice to see those familiar faces. And you really, even for us, we've been doing this for so long, we find support and motivation to really to do this. You know, it gives us motivation. Of course, now we're all stuck at home, but eventually that will pass. So check out the pod idea.
We have pods switching to virtual events as well, so there's still plenty of ways to get connected.
Yes.
Colin, we have another question for you. Can you speak to the need to get our economy restarted? What role do you see nutrition playing in terms of antibodies?
Well, of course, I spoke to that before. Again, I wouldn't focus on any specific nutrient, for example, to create any particular response. We can see that if we can test that kind of thing and see it. But once again, the immune system is a large toolkit, and it has marvelous ways of organizing things. And at the same time, plants have, all the necessary components to help that happen. I just don't know. I don't want to be too specific, without, even if I had the evidence where somebody showed something involving a particular nutrient, something like that, I wouldn't honor it all that much. It's just additional, sort of information that helps to support the ideas, whole plant-based foods, just that simple.
Thank you, Colin. So our next question here is also for you, and Nelson, you can comment on this as well. What do we need to do to have medical doctors and experts begin to inform the public on how to strengthen the immune system? Nobody in any country is talking about this, and this is from Michael.
Yes, well, first off, I want to mention this. We haven't said this yet. We have the organization called, it's in my name, Nutrition Studies, the Center for Nutrition Studies. That's the website is nutritionstudies.org. We have an online course there. We've had about 50,000 graduates. It's a certificate program. It's done with Cornell University. We have lots and lots of articles. And the reason I'm mentioning this at this point too, there's a lot of articles on there. And I don't recall, I think there's a few on the immune system. But in any case, I forget what the first part of your question was. What?
How do we engage physicians?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and yeah, in that program that we have, physicians are able to get 30 so-called Category 1 continuing medical education credits. We have the equivalent for other health people too. And so it's been very successful, and I would suggest for physicians, for starters, they can do that. My son, Tom, Nelson's brother, also is a physician, one who wrote the book with me at the University of Rochester. He has a group of lectures that's free, that's available just for physicians, just for that kind of question. And so they, in fact, can access that information. It's really kind of sad. I've been personally concerned for some time. I can say since 1980, when I was selected along with some other nutritionists to speak to medical schools at that time by the AMA to talk with medical schools about how they might get more nutrition into their program. And it was a total waste of time. They just didn't have any interest. And now, in the more recent times, I've become more jaundiced on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm seeing a lot of physicians get interested. And I would like to say that if medical schools, for one, could offer that course, would be very helpful. Dr. Michael Clapper is working really hard on that at the present time. He's really got a good thing going there. As far as individual physicians concerned, take the course. I mean, we're continually improving it. It's not as good as it could be, although we've had a lot of success with it. And physicians, I mean, I find it, I've spoken to a lot of medical schools, probably at least 200 now, I think. And what I'm encouraged by is the fact that of all the professions, when I speak to a medical audience, I find a lot of enthusiasm, in part because they've suddenly become aware, wow, this is really interesting, this is pretty neat, and they weren't taught it. But then the whole momentum slows somewhat because they're not being reimbursed. There's no mechanism for them to be appropriately reimbursed. So physicians, yeah, they've got the background. If I'm speaking to some here on this conference, in this call here, just get a book. Obviously, I'm biased in that way. And
yeah, I'd like to jump in here as well, Deb. We're getting short on time, but just wanted to slip in here that this platform I mentioned early on, I said we're getting ready to introduce a platform to our pod network. This platform will make available to pods projects that they can engage in. One project is going to be focused on healthcare providers. So pod members will be able to carry information about a plant-based diet to their healthcare providers. Healthcare providers will be able to access this project and resources and programs that will enable them to prescribe a plant-based immersion program to their patients. So we're going to actually provide education and specific programming that makes it easy to introduce healthcare providers to this idea and then to prescribe a plant-based diet. And partners in this project include the Center for Nutrition Studies and the PlantNutrition Project, which is the largest association of plant-based doctors in the world. So we got a lot that we're going to be sharing here in a few weeks about specifically about this question.
We have one last question for you, Nelson. Why is the global Jumpstart strategy important to the larger plant-based movement?
Well, you know, I mentioned this briefly at the end of the last webinar, but the thing that kind of most aggravates me about what's happening right now, and my dad alluded to this as well, the fact that there's no discussion in the media about nutrition and as it relates to this disease process, this COVID-19. And yet it's the most important idea that could be communicated to people right now. And there are major medical media personalities out there who know about my dad's work and his book. In fact, my dad's met with and talked to two of probably the most famous of these people. I'm not going to name names, but they've never uttered the word nutrition in all of their commentary. And at the end of PlantPure Nation, you know, I make the statement at the end, you know, after we told that story of our failed legislative attempt, that we can't look up to government always to fix our problems. You know, there is a role for government, but more and more we should be looking, you know, within and around ourselves for solutions. We have to start thinking grassroots. This is how we overcome the powers, the vested interest and the powerful interests that don't want you to know about this idea, who are profiting from our sickness. And so we have to take a grassroots approach. And this global jumpstart is an example of that. It's an example of that. So I think that's why it's important to the larger plant-based movement, is we have to start thinking grassroots. How do we mobilize large numbers of people to get the word out? And this is, as I said, this Jumpstart is the first step in a larger strategy that we're going to be rolling out over the remainder of this year.
Great, I think that's all the questions that we have time for. Nelson, if you and Colin would wrap things up now.
Yeah, I'd like to add just a comment on, to finish up here, a point Nelson just made, which is absolutely correct. The media are not doing a good job relating this information. And I don't know who he's talking about, but I'm going to name a name here, maybe create a little bit of dust. It's Sanjay Gupta. I've met him. We've talked about it. He wrote a really very complimentary article on the Standard website, yet he doesn't talk about it. When he's asking about this sort of thing, I would, if this reaches his audience, please tell him he's a fine fellow. He's very anxious to say the right thing, but I wish he would talk about something that I know he knows about.
All right, so I would just add as a closing comment I want to emphasize one point that came up earlier. Please reach out to your friends, share this. This is something that you can do to change the lives around you. This is a way to express compassion. You know, it's easy to get angry at a situation. It's easy to get angry about the fact that our government has lied to us for a long time. And that's one reason why we have so many vulnerable people in our population now, which is tragic, vulnerable to this disease. So it's easy to get angry about all of that. But, you know, there's a lot of anger floating around. It's never good just to act based on anger. The best kinds of movements, the best kinds of actions are always founded in love. And this is a way for you to reach out and touch the people around you and to share some love, change their lives. So please, you know, try to get at least 5 of your friends, but as many as you can, to join this global jumpstart, which starts on Sunday. It's not too late to sign up.